My name is Ron Carrico. I'm with the San Diego Air and Space Museum, and today is the 22nd of July 2015, and today we're talking with Navy Commander retired Harold Nate Murphy, who entered the U.S. Navy in 1941, spent 20 years as his career. Give me your full name.
Harold N. Murphy.
Just like I said.
Nate for real.
Where does Nate come from?
Nathan, my middle name.
Oh.
Squadron, which was also a Navy reserve base. So while we were there, this guy came by in an old time airplane, and my uncle bought me a ride around the field, and I was going to show you. That was the airplane that he bought me a trip around the field for $5, and then I got sold on flying. So I then.
So that's a Jenny there.
Huh?
That was a Jenny, a JN4.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
now, did you go to college?
I went to Northeastern University, and when I graduated from high school, I went to work on the open farm on the thing, but I went down to the Air Force, the Army and the Navy inductees, and they said, "Oh no, you have to have at least 2 years of college. We can't take you in." So I said, "Fine." So I went back and I got into going to Northeastern University. Well, my marks weren't that good, but they did kick me out, so I did get 2 years in, and so when I got my 2 years, I ran down to the inductees, and the Navy took me.
So were you involved in the CPT, the Civilian Pilot Training Program?
That's how I got into flying. Yeah, then when I was. Go ahead.
So this would be like 1940 or so.
It would be 38, I think it was.
Oh, that early?
Yeah. Well, I joined the Navy in March 15th, 1941.
Okay.
So I may not have that. Probably that was not a good time that I gave you there. That was too early. But it was somewhere around 40, 41. That.
So when in the Civilian Pilot Training Program, what airplane did you fly?
A Piper Cub.
Piper Cub.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you soloed?
Oh, I soloed, got 40 hours. And so then put in for and got the next step up, was like a acrobatic phase of that. And so I went up to Waterville, Maine, and myself and I guess there must have been half a dozen other pilots from other areas, and spent the summer there, and I got another 40 hours, so now I got 80 hours.
What did you fly there?
Huh?
What did you fly?
Well, actually I flew a Waco F.
Okay, I know that airplane.
And you'd fly in the morning, and then in the afternoon you'd work on airplanes, because it was a little old strip there. There's some guys had gotten together, and but anyway, that's.
So then March of 1941 is when you joined the Navy then?
March 15th, 1941.
And did you have to attend an officer training program first?
No, I went into the Navy in Squantum as a seaman second.
Right.
So I was going to spend a month there cleaning airplanes and what have you, and before they'd think about sending me down to Jacksonville. So when they found out that I had 80 hours, they took me and sent me right on down. So I got down there, and I was in class 3B41J, which meant third class. This B, the second half of the month, and J, Jacksonville, and so I had a ring which I had engraved 3B41J, and somebody stole it. But any.
Oh no.
Oh, I will tell you that off the record.
Yeah. Okay, so what airplanes did you fly in pilot training?
In pilot training, well, there they are. That was.
So you flew the N2S and the N3N and the SNC and the OS2U3. Wow.
Do you remember any of those? Maybe the SNJ you might have.
Oh yeah, SNJ. It says SNC here, but it's an SNJ, I think. Where were you when December 7th, 41 happened, when the war started?
Well, I went through my flight training at Jacksonville, and then my I guess fleet training, I guess, down at Miami, and flew planes that had just come out of the like they F4F, F2F, and F3F, and SBC4, SBC3. They were all just one phase short of what we were then flying. In other words, when I left Miami, I had orders to Scouting 71 flying SB2U2s, which was a dog, but that's what our first highest class bomber. They were called Scout bomber, but they actually also, we flew them like dive bombers. So, matter of fact, we flew then an airplane called a BT-1, and on the BT-1, when you were up practicing, you didn't roll into the dive. You looked straight at the target, and in between the rudders was a window, and you flew until you could see the target in the window, and then you pushed over onto the dive, which was supposed to give you the right degree, but we never really did much with that because it was that. So we
and very uncomfortable.
Yeah,
very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was like everything was in your mouth.
Yeah. Well, okay. So at what point were you selected to fly a dive bomber as opposed to a transport or opposed to a fighter?
Well, I finished the training at Miami in March of September of 41, and I was given my wings on September 15, and I was told that I am now getting orders to Scouting 71 aboard the USS Wasp, and that was when, of course, everybody wanted to be a fighter pilot. Well, they talked that out of me by putting me up against an instructor who shot me down and nothing flat. So I ended up on SP2U2, and it was, as I say, it was a dog. And I'll tell you if we have time a couple of things about that.
Go ahead.
Well, when I checked in on December the 7th. I was sitting in Norfolk in the training squadron. They were waiting for the ship to come back so I could go aboard. They were in what's that? See, there I go. Off the coast of the United States. The ship was anchored there, and when December 7th came, they went crazy. I mean, you couldn't get off the base, couldn't get on the base. Everybody was blacked out, no lights. I mean, it was, and so it took a while until the ship up anchored and came around and came into Norfolk, and then we new pilots reported aboard. So now I'm a Navy pilot, but I've never landed on a carrier. And I've only got maybe 150 hours, 200 hours. And so I was not a very hot rod. I began to see that I'm not who I think I am. I thought I was a pretty good pilot, but later on I found out I was just normal.
So so now you're aboard the Wasp, and it's December 1941. Where'd you go? What'd they do?
Well, the ship with us aboard went up to left Norfolk and escorted some ships, some troop ships, up to Iceland, and then the British would bring over their ships and pick them up and escort them from Iceland into Orkney Islands. And so then when that was, after we turned them loose, the ship would go back and we would anchor in what's the name of that bay off of Maine?
Goose Bay?
Huh?
Goose Bay or Labrador?
No, it was just in Maine. It was
Penobscot Bay. There's a bunch of bays.
See, now I all day I've known that. Now I can't tell you now, so anyway, then we would wait there and until the next time through. But at that time, I was supposed to get my carrier landings in and things so that I would be ready to go. Well, the weather was stinking, and the ship had to go into mothballs for a little bit to get repaired, and so it never happened. So we then this one day went aboard. The ship left Casco Bay. Casco,
yeah, okay. Sure.
Left Casco Bay and picked up a thing, and we were now escorting a large convoy, and we're now we're in the war, and so we were headed out, and we were going to go take the troops all the way into Orkney Islands, which was fine. So the first day out, stinking lousy weather. That morning when they woke up, they couldn't find the admiral. The admiral went overboard. And so now they thought they saw him, so they launched 4 airplanes out of my squadron. And they went back and circled around and looked for the admiral, and they said they saw him, but he was dead and floating. So anyway, they then said, okay, well, come on back and land aboard. Well, they couldn't find the carrier, so they had to send the carrier back. They found a destroyer, so they finally sent the carrier back where the destroyer was and joined the landing pattern. So in those days, you'd come down parallel to the wind line at 300 feet, and then you'd take your distance off the guy ahead by when you turned this way. So the second plane in was my roommate, and as he came downwind, he got slow, and all of a sudden he went in. Well, they couldn't find him, so and then they landed the other 2 aboard. So the question always was, would they have sent out those planes if they'd been an individual, a sailor rather than the admiral? But of course, we all knew that they would not have. But anyway, we went all the way to Orkney Islands, and had stayed the ship, and they flew us. We flew off and landed it at a little strip on land.
Well, so how long were you doing? Did you actually fly at all yourself
Did I what?
Were you flying at all during these escort missions?
On the way over, I was the only one that wasn't carrier qualified. So the captain said, shoot him off. So they shot me off, and I did an ASW for about 3 hours, and then they called me in for landing. Well, it was so bad that every time I come around to make an approach, and I get set up for the cut, and the deck would drop out, and now you got 15, 20 feet, and so they'd wave me off. So they did that about 4 times, and I couldn't get in sync with the ship. So the captain said, cut him, we're getting out of here, because he had to leave the screen to get into the wind, so they could land aboard. So he could, only 1 airplane. So I came around, and Dave McCampbell, who was Medal of Honor winner was our LSO, and so he came around. He cut me, and I was way high, but all I could do was I just held everything, and the airplane came flying in, hit the deck, caught a wire, and I stopped that far short of burying my nose in this 5-inch gun mount. So I then was now a qualified Navy pilot. So that was, things were funny in those days. The powers that be didn't really think that we were in a war, I guess, because, well, for instance, on my last flight off the Wasp before she was sunk, they put a kid in my rear seat who'd never been in. He wanted flight skins, so he had to have 4 hours a month to qualify for flight skins. So they took this kid and they stuck him in my rear cockpit, my rear seat, and he got 4 hours. But now I'm stuck with a rear seat man because the ship is burning. He's never been in an airplane before, and here I'm going to take him into combat.
Okay, so now you're talking about the Wasp being sunk. Where was that?
That was September the 15th.
42.
42.
Okay, so where was it?
Oh, we were in escorting and attacking Japanese planes off south of Guadalcanal.
Okay, so let's back up. So the Wasp actually it must have gone around the Horn to go to the Pacific.
Came through the
canal.
Yeah, but where was I? I came across the country on a troop train, and so half the squadron came on a troop train. The other half stayed aboard the ship because they had left enough planes on to give them ASW coverage.
Anti-submarine warfare.
Yeah.
You're looking for subs.
Yeah.
That's what they're there for.
As soon as the troop train got to San Diego, the carrier was coming around through the thing, and so they came up the coast and we rendezvoused in San Diego.
So when did you sail out of San Diego?
We sailed out of there, I would say the beginning of September, but
Well, the Guadalcanal campaign started in August 7th, 1942. So did you sail prior to that or after?
Well, we were on station. Yeah, we when we left San Diego, we joined up with a group of troop ships, and took them out and get in position for an amphibious landing on August the 7th. Which we did, and they landed, and there was no problem. Everybody just walked. It wasn't what they thought it was, but the minute that happened, that the Japs were all over us. You had to give them credit. My target was Tanambogo. Tanambogo was a Japanese seaplane base, and so
on Guadalcanal.
And on what?
Was it on Guadalcanal?
No, that was on Florida Islands, which was on the other side of Iron Bottom Sounds. And so I guess there were half a dozen of us. They split up with the dive bombers. And so half a dozen of us, and we were carrying 1,000-pounders. First time I'd ever flown with a 1,000-pounder. And
no, this is just a SBD, which version?
SBD 3s.
Okay. I didn't know they'd carry a 1,000-pound bomb.
Huh?
I didn't know they'd carry a 1,000-pound bomb. Wow. That's a
they did. They carried 1,000-pound Tanambogo before and after. So that supported the seaplanes. And of course, when we got there, the fighters, they wiped out all the Jap seaplanes that were sitting waiting to fly or to maintenance or what have you. So they did that. So then we dropped. We had some anti-aircraft, but not very much. And so then we dropped and went back to the carrier, and then we operated off the carrier, ASW, attacks against Japanese targets, things like that, until September the 15th, when they caught a fish, and that was the end of the Wasp.
Okay, so you were in the air. You were okay. Well, let me get chronological here. So, you knew you were going to Guadalcanal on the way over.
No, we didn't. Nobody
Okay.
told us what we were going to do until the day before. They ran a practice landing at and I forget the name of the island. It was an uninhabited island, and it was a fiasco. People were bombing other people and doing everything the wrong way. But the next morning we took off about 4 o'clock with pitch black, no radio contact, no lights, and join up. And we'd never done that before. So we got airborne, and we got joined up, and we were flying on your buddy's exhaust, and so that was all right. And then they were flying on you.
The blue flame of the exhaust.
Huh?
Blue flame of the exhaust.
Yeah.
Coming out of the radial
Yeah.
motor. Okay.
And
so now, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
we were all set to go, and away we went. And some horse's butt decided he better see if his guns work. So he charged we had 250s fired forward through the prop, and so he fired, and he was right here. And I thought, oh, that's it. They shot us down. I never had anybody shoot a gun that close to me, but I found out I didn't get shot down, so I continued on flying in. But
okay, now this would be the morning of August the 7th.
that's right. No, of August the 7th. No, this was September the 15th, and because then we landed on the Hornet. That we couldn't land on the Wasp. She was keeled over, and so we were circling around. What are we going to do? We were too far out to go to land-based plane, and you couldn't land on the Wasp. So some smart guy on the Hornet said, "Well, why don't we bring him over here and land him here?" So they said, "Okay," and they did. Now I didn't hear him saying all this, of course, but that's what they did. So. We went over there, and the Hornet was filled up. So they took as many planes as they could, and then they'd throw one over the side and land one, throw it over the side and land one, till they got all of our planes aboard. And so, no, well, wait a minute, I'm lying on that. I'm lying. They didn't, but they didn't go in the water. They took them off and joined them up, and then they have the fuel headed out for the base so that we could land on the Hornet. Well, those planes that they sent that way never got there. They got lost, and they never found them.
So they were going to go to Henderson Field. Those airplanes that took off.
No, they weren't going to Henderson, because Henderson was a no-no at that time.
Really?
When the Wasp was sunk, the Henderson was they were working on it. The Marines were using Japanese equipment to build the base, and so it wasn't until August the 7th that they actually had any contact with the Japs. The Japs, I don't know, they didn't know that we were there, but the only trouble we had was with the Japanese submarines at that point.
Well, as I recall, from they took the island, or they took that portion of the island. I think it was on, well, I don't remember exactly where it is. They knew the base was there, and the reason they took it is they didn't want the Japanese defenses to be set up.
This is true.
So they took the island.
This is true.
Took the base area, and the Japanese sort of scurried out. Fortunately, they had a lot of provisions, and so they ended up eating the food the Japanese had, mostly rice. The Japanese soldiers end up in the jungle eating coconuts for a few days until they marshaled an attack, and then clear up until February. They were trying to regain the strip. So did you ever go into Henderson? Were you part of the Cactus Air Force?
Yeah, when we left the Hornet and flew into Espiritu Santos.
Okay.
We figured, well, we'll spend a couple of days here and go on home. Well, no way. We got in there, and first thing they said, we need three airplanes at Guadalcanal. And so Eldridge, our skipper, took two of the guys, and they shoved off. And so we didn't hear any more from them.
What was the squadron? What was the squadron called then? What was your unit called?
What was it called? Scouting 71.
You're still a squadron. You're still.
Huh?
You're still 71.
Scouting
71.
Now we don't have anything because we've lost this carrier.
Lost your carrier.
We've only got 12 planes, so that's it. So we joined Marine Air Wing 1, and so we became part of Marine Air Wing 1, but it was never official. Although we did get the right to wear the Presidential Unit Citation, which was given to the people there.
Okay, well, let me back up a little bit. So August the 7th, when the invasion started of Guadalcanal, were you on station? Were you flying that day?
Yes, it just so happened we had a 12-man search, 200-mile search. We had report of a Japanese group of ships were in the area, and they sent out 12 of us in two plane sections, like a hunk of pie, and each one searched a 15-degree section. And when we came back, we left at 2, and when we came back, we couldn't find the ship. We had an E6B plotting board which we carried with us, and we could plot what we were flying, and the carrier was supposed to say, well, this is our track, and this is where we're going to go. And so using that, then we would figure where we had to go to intercept them. When we got there, we couldn't find the ship, so we started an expanded square search until we saw some smoke. And we followed the smoke, and there was the Wasp. She was keeled over, and you could see that she was not going anyplace. So then we landed.
No, this is a different date, though. This is in September. I want to know what you did on August the 15th, August the 7th.
August the 7th, we were set up to support the landing, which took place that morning. And so.
And what did you personally do?
We went to Florida Island and dropped our bomb on this one that I showed you here, Tanambogo. And the Japs, of course, as soon as we started heaving, we shelled them with our ship, our cruisers and destroyers. Gave them shelling before landing. They all took off and went up into the hills. But they were not fighting troops. They were the guys that were building the airport. Oh yeah. And so they were no problem. But the minute the Japs heard about it, that afternoon, we were hit by Japanese two-engine Betty bombers. And I think they shot down one of our planes. We got the pilot back, but the Cunner, he died. So that was the beginning. There was never a time in the 7 weeks that I was at Guadalcanal that we weren't hit either by bombs, by shelling by the ground troops breaking through our lines. Every day there was a contact or something. It was, and then at night you couldn't sleep because they kept the plane overhead circling, dropping bombs, doing whatever they could to make it untenable for us.
So the guy that was flying overhead, he was probably in a Betty bomber, and he would set the engines so they were out of sync, so it would make a lot of noise. What they call him, Washingmachine Charlie or something like that?
Yeah.
And I guess that was just to keep you awake all night.
That's right. They did. They didn't except on October the 13th. That night, they started firing flares in the up, and just causing trouble. And all of a sudden, an explosion in the tree. The son of a bitches were firing, taking cannons, 14-inch guns, battleships, two battleships, and they were steaming back and forth, firing 14-inch shells into Henderson Field, and they fired. For 1 solid hour, they fired 1,000 rounds of 14-inch shells, and just devastated the whole thing. And when we woke up the next morning, there was no Henderson Field. It was the morning after the Japanese battleships shelled us, and so everything was quiet, dead. And along came the Japs, and now the Zeros and the Bettys, and they're circling, waiting for something to happen. And we tried to shoot at them, but they get away. But all of a sudden, one of the Bettys pulls off and comes screaming down the runway, and got just about the end of the runway, and he goes, boing, and everybody went crazy. Hooray! They yelled. They jumped out of the foxhole. So that was our day of fame.
Well, but then right after that, you must, I mean, I know they had to repair the runway, and then after they repaired the runway, then you went out and probably searching for the battleships after that, right?
No, because we couldn't get a plane off. We only had 2 planes that was flyable, and we couldn't. One dumb son of a bitch taxied into a shell hole, and then we couldn't. We couldn't get the plane.
Was that you, by the? Was that you, by the way?
Oh, that was me. I forget that. Erase that. That was named after Marine Major.
Marine Major.
Yeah.
You didn't know him though.
No.
But he was flying a dive bomber as well, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, but he was flying off of Midway, off the island. I wasn't there. Henderson was flying off the shore, and the Marines. They had some that were off the carrier and Navy, and they were flying off the Navy ships.
So he probably got shot down trying to sink one of the ships out there, one of the carriers.
Yeah. Well, see, at the Battle of Midway, they put everything they had in the air, like the VT-8, Torpedo 8. They were flying not the TBF at that time, but the TBD. And the TBD went at 100 miles an hour, and it didn't make a damn difference whether you were making a pass to drop a torpedo or what they were doing. They'd fly at 100. So they shot down every one of them, and they all died except Gay, Ensign Gay, who got out, and they picked him up the next day.
Did you ever meet him?
Huh?
Did you ever meet him? George Gay?
Never met him, no. But he saw what was going on. But and then the SB2U2, they had half a dozen of those. Those pilots, they wiped them out like nothing. They were fodder. So at the same time, thank God, our SBDs found their carriers and decapitated 4 of them. So
that was essentially the end of the war.
No, now see, there I disagree with you.
Really? Okay.
You got 4 carriers of our carriers. No, I mean 4 of their carriers. Now that's not all their carriers. They got another half a dozen or a dozen of them back at the home islands, but they have stopped them right now from going any further. But now along came with us down in the Guadalcanal, and it was our job to stop the Japanese from going any further south, because if they did, then they would interfere with the support of Australia and New Zealand. And so consequently, they had to make sure, like Espiritu Santos, Noumea, the Solomon Islands, Munda, Bougainville, Empress Augusta, all of these areas were in support of Guadalcanal, which is making sure that the Japs didn't, take it back. We couldn't afford to give them back the island, because we did. Where would we go? And then the chapter got wide open to Australia and New Zealand. Matter of fact, they actually one time did making a pass at Australia, and I forget the name. Over by I forget.
Port Moresby, I think.
Yeah.
Port
Moresby. Yeah. So anyway, that's...
Did you okay? Now, in 1942, did you have that big picture? Oh, hell no.
Hell no, all we were doing, I was only a Lieutenant JG, and all I did was if we need a strike here, let's go. Every day, you would go down to the operations tent and hang around, and they'd send out a search every morning, and if they found a contact, and they could, let me kind of back up. When they worked on the airplanes, their first priority was mechanical. Make sure, can you get it in the air? Secondly, what are they going to do? Drop a bomb, or what are we going to put a bomb on it? Okay, now we've got what we need, send them off. But what about our 50 calibers? We haven't got time for those. And what about our 30 calibers in the rear seat? Let your gunner take care of that. So now you're out there, and you're coming up on you don't have any way of if some Jap Zeros make a pass at you. You don't have any way of fighting back. Maybe your rear seat man has got one or maybe two guns. So now he's got some help of scaring them away. Matter of fact, on one occasion where I made an attack on a Jap ships. The Zeros jumped us, and we were flying formation on the skipper, and John Eldridge went down on the water and stayed low, so the only way they could get a shot at you was to swing around behind you. So they'd come up about half a dozen, and the front guy would shoot at you, and then he'd pull off and do a loop or a slow roll. They're like a bunch of kids. And so finally one guy pulled off, and instead of going up, he drifted across like that, caught his float in the water, flipped over on his back, and that was it. So the guy who was leading the 4 planes, he got credit for shooting down that, you know. But anyway, they were so busy doing what they had to do, nobody worried about that at that time.
Okay, let me back up here. This, for the camera here, what you're hearing is a T-34 out there going round and round, landing over at North Island Naval Air Station.
Yeah, they try to induce these guys to become aviators. They want them to join the program.
Well, I've played golf out there, and they'll just be going around shooting touch and goes, one after another, like 30 or 40
they're
times.
Demonstrating in the back seat. They got a young young officer. I don't know what rank, and they're showing him these things so that he can decide. Yeah, I'd like to be one. So okay, sign him up. We got one, and that's what they're doing, trying to get people for the program.
Maybe they'll take me. Okay, all right. Let's talk about. You got to the Hornet. Okay, now you're on the Hornet, and from September the 15th. And what were you doing when you were on the Hornet? Just out in a submarine patrol and looking for targets, or
no? We landed that afternoon, and then next morning he shot us off for Espiritu Santos.
Okay, and then how long were you there?
We were at Espiritu Santos. Well, the first 3 went up to the canal about 4 or 5 days later. They called and they needed him, right. And then the next 6, of which I was one of them, went up about 2 days later, because they'd already wiped out 2 of the 3 that went up the day before.
How many hours did you have at that time?
Oh, I might have 500 hours. See, my logbooks every time were lost. They were on board the ship and they were lost. Everything was lost. Matter of fact, I had $500 in my safe in my room. That was long gone.
So you go from Espiritu Santos to Guadalcanal right around October 1st, 42, somewhere in there?
I got there October the 2nd.
October 2nd.
Yeah.
So you were part of the Cactus Air Force.
That's right. We became part of, at that time became part of Marine Air Wing 1. And we were indiscriminate when you'd send out a flight. It could be Navy pilots, could be Marine pilots. And then there were, at one point, there were some Army where they had flying P-39s, P-38s, but none of them, P-38s they could get altitude, but they didn't get us enough of those to do any good. They sent them all to Europe, and we didn't get many. So.
And the P-39, or P-400 as they called it at that time.
The P-400 was no good above 10,000
No, it didn't have a supercharger.
And the P-39, no good above 10,000.
Yeah.
But they were good for troop support. And
well, it had that big cannon out the front of the nose there. So, okay, so now, when you were at Henderson, what were you doing as a dive bomber pilot?
Well, I would go down and sit in ops until they say we need 6 planes, let's go, and you'd go and get in a plane, and there was no briefing. You knew you had to fly wing on him, so you join out and fly, and he'd go out where they made the contact, and well, the very next day, we flew up on the wing of a DC-3, and because it was beyond our capability to do that kind of navigating. But anyway, we did, and it was 400 miles. So we landed in there that afternoon.
Where?
Oh, when we got there, we couldn't land because the field was under attack.
Where? What?
Henderson.
At Henderson, okay.
Yeah. And so we waited, and then we landed. So the next day, John Eldridge, our skipper, took 5 of us, so 6 plane route. We had a contact, so off we go, and we found 6 destroyers. So he's got 3 planes, and I got 3 planes. So his 3 planes go on the first 3 destroyers, and now I've got 2 more flying on me. We go on the other 3 plane thing. Well, they sunk one. Mine, we got 3 near misses, and as far as we could tell, it was hurt pretty bad. But so we left. We used our bomb. So they sent another strike group out, and when they got there, they found there were only 2 planes left. So our 3 bombs sunk one. In other words, they were close enough so that they leaked up.
Yeah, they call it the water hammer or something like that. The concussion will crush the ship. So let's talk about that. So, what altitude did you roll in from? And when you attack the ship, you're the leader of 3 airplanes, right? Was it a V shape or do you have an echelon formation?
Well, if you're in a shape like so. So if you're going to make a contact over here, you want this guy out of the way. So you reach up with your arm and you point and you go like that, and that means okay, get over here. So he drops down, pulls over here. Now we got three in like that. So they 1, 2, 3. You follow them on down. So the first day. So
no wait. So you're the leader.
Yeah.
So what airspeed are you and what altitude?
Well, it was rather a loose deal. I mean, there was no formalization. You got out there, you saw the airplane, you saw the ship, and you headed for it. Sometimes you go that way, sometimes you go that way. It's dependent upon where you are relative to the ship.
But you're doing about 120, 125 when you.
Oh, you do. If you're starting your run now, you're coming into it. You're coming into it, and you're building up speed, and then all of a sudden down you go. So you keep your speed up, and we found out right away that it didn't make a damn bit of difference whether you cracked your flaps or you didn't crack your flaps. So we would save being on site, being shot at, seconds by not splitting the flaps. John Eldridge, the skipper, he was a do-gooder by the book. Poor old John would split his flaps and away he'd go, and we'd go chung chung chung, and there'd be John back up here, and we're already long gone.
Now what you're talking about is the dive flaps at the back of the wing that have the big holes in them, so it slows the airplane down.
That's right.
So when he's in a dive, he's probably not going much over 200 miles an hour.
That's right.
And you're probably doing 270, 280, something like that. Okay. What were you using to aim? What were you using to aim?
What?
What were you aiming with? To when you actually, what was you used to line up? Did you have a scope or gun sight?
You have a scope, and you could use that. It depends on what you were doing, whether you used it or not. If you think you got a pretty good spot, you don't worry about that. And
what was your dive angle? Any idea?
Have what?
Dive angle, 70 degrees, 80 degrees?
Well, it's supposed to have been 75 degrees, I believe, but a case in point, thank God I didn't, that the steeper you are, the more it's hard for the guy shooting the gun to get to depress. He can only depress his gun so far when on surface gunnery. If they're shooting at a target, like they can only depress their big guns so much, and they can't hit in close. But if you give them more room, then they can go 18, 20 miles inland. You understand what I'm trying to say?
No, you're talking about the anti-aircraft guns? I mean,
yeah.
You want to come in really as steep as you can.
Yeah.
Because that makes the bomb more accurate, correct?
Yes. Well, toward the end, they came up with a new ship that had AA battery, like 3 guns battery, and they would fire them at you, and you could see the son of a bitch to shoot. You could see them coming, and it would look like they're coming. But because your angle was this way rather than this way, they'd go by you. They go by you this way. But if you didn't do that and you were 75 degrees, you'd be flying right in the. So we most of the time would try to get it a little steeper if you could. So.
What altitude do you think you released the bomb?
The what?
What altitude were you when you released the bomb? 2,000 feet?
1,500 normally.
And then
you'd have your air crewman call 25, 2,000, pull.
Sure.
And so you're out of there. But it doesn't say you always had to do that. You might get in a situation where, well, I made an attack on Rabaul Harbor one time, and they had clouds at 1,500. Well, I started off and fine, and all of a sudden the cloud moves in. Well, what the hell do? You keep going, and as soon as you break out, you pull through, because you don't have much room to pull. And you sometimes, and they do have hit the water doing that. But what do? You're committed. So,
how many G's did you pull on the way out?
Oh, you get a little gray sometimes, but
5 or 6 G's then.
Oh yeah, but it wasn't a question of how many G's you pull. The question is, can I drop this son of a bitch doing close enough to do some damage? And in this case, when I break out ships over here and I push my right rudder and pull the release, I don't know whether that's going to throw the bomb over there. I mean, I don't know how to throw a bomb like that, but that's what you did. You hated not to use it, but you knew you're not going to get a hit. But anyway.
So after you pull out, then did you just stay low and then stay near the water and get the hell out of Dodge?
Well, the first time that did this, when I pulled out, everything was nice and peaceful and everything's quiet. And my rear seat said, "Mr. Murphy, take a look back here." And I turned around, and my God, the guys of the water, I was doing this, and they were just shooting in. I didn't see it, but boy, from then on, whenever what the hell's the matter with him? Why doesn't he fly straight and level? That was the reason, because
So you were jinking after. So when you pull out, you start jinking back and forth all over the place.
That's right.
Wow, wow. Okay, so now we're back at Henderson Field, and you were there until when?
Until November the 10th
of
1942.
Oh, so you were just there for about a month or so.
I was there 5 weeks.
Why did they let you go?
Why did they let us go? Yeah. Because at that time they were fat cats. They were contemplating. There was a Japs were making an attempt to get enough ships so they could do away with Henderson Field, and the Marines were not going to let them do it. So they had, at that time, they had pretty good shape. So I don't know why they turned us loose. They didn't need pilots, they needed airplanes. So I guess they turned us loose so we could go back and train, other guys that are going to be coming forward. But
so how many missions do you think you flew out of Henderson?
Oh, I could count maybe 6 where I attacked ships every time. But as far as missions, we sometimes fly 2 or 3 missiles a day against ground troops, against ships coming in. Or
what did you do with the ground troops?
Oh, well, you'd get a call from the Marines saying we need help here. We need some air support. We got a bunch of Japs. Like Pete Coit and I, one day we got a call, and they gave us the target, and we talked to the guys right there on site, and so they gave me the thing, and so we ran parallel to the Japanese for the front lines, and I think we had 100-pounders. We could carry 300-pounders, and we released these 100-pounders along, and we laid them right on the Japs, and they said, "Boy, you really broke that up." So
what was the backseater doing?
The what?
Your backseater, did he have a machine gun? Was he sort of strafing as you drove along, dropping the bombs?
No, we didn't use them too much for that. They couldn't get the gun down, and you couldn't get this way because you'd shoot your tail off. You didn't have anything that they used to. Some of the when you fire through the props, it would not fire when the props in the way.
Sure.
But in the back with the gunner back there, he had to not shoot his tail. We had a lot of them come back with the top of their rudder cut off because they shoot off their own rudders. But
now at Henderson Field, when you were there, I mean, you were there when the flying first started, and I understand it was just a disaster as far as there was no fuel trucks. They had to load things with the 55-gallon drums, right? And use jeeps to get gas around, and they were scavenging parts off of airplanes that had been crashed. So you were flying these airplanes, I guess, right? I mean, the airplanes weren't in the best of repair. Would it be fair to say?
Well, the bad night was October the 3rd when the 2 Jap battleships shelled us.
That's when you got there.
No, we got there on the it should have been the 13th, not
13th.
The 13th.
Okay.
That morning when we woke up, you never believe, I got all the clean clothes I wanted. It was all hanging off the coconut tree and everything. So I went out and gathered up underclothes and anything else that I needed, because I was there for 5 weeks, and I had 1 bath at 5 weeks. I now had a full beard, and it was a mess. I didn't have any spare clothes at all. What I had on was what I wore all the time, and.
But now guys are getting sick. Guys are getting dysentery and malaria and all sorts of horrible things are happening.
Well, on the 12th that night, they put me in the sick bay. I had 104 fever and I had malaria. So that was fine. And then they started throwing those 14-inch shells in. So I got into the foxhole from the hospital foxhole, and I don't know where everybody else. Everything black as hell, and I'm sitting there shaking like hell. I mean, I was scared. I was scared, and I was not feeling good. So you could hear the.
I can't imagine a most horrible situation. It's pitch black, 104 temperature. You're shivering from fear and from malaria.
Well, they didn't worry about that. I mean, if they had somebody,
you were probably hoping you'd get by a shell by then.
Yeah. Well, when morning came and I was feeling better, they sent me out flying.
Oh.
So Pete Coit and I went out. I went to go out, and I got stuck in a foxhole, and I couldn't get out of the foxhole. So Pete, he went out.
I mean, your airplane got stuck. Your airplane got stuck in a foxhole.
My airplane got stuck, yeah, in the foxhole. With the SBD in most planes, you have to taxi like this, so
right.
you can't see ahead. So if you're not careful, which I wasn't, I guess, this wheel caught in the thing. So if I poured coal to get out of it, the airplane would rise up, and I would think I'm going to go over my back. So I couldn't do it. So I got as close as I could get without going over, but I couldn't break it clear. So, and then when Pete Coit comes back, he goes out and he drops a 100-pound bomb on a battleship. That's silly, but he did. When he came back, he took he had a radio, and he took his the lead off, so nobody could talk to him. And here these Jap planes were making runs on him, and he's coming downwind to land. So he came downwind and landed, and everything was fine. He didn't realize that the Japanese were firing at him because he couldn't talk to his rear seatman because he'd unplugged his radio. But it was
so. So now you knew if there was an air raid because they had radar and they had a coastal watch.
Coast watchers.
Coast watchers. And what did they call in and on the radio or something to tell you there were Japanese inbound?
The coast watchers had radios.
Right.
And they could communicate, but if they communicated with the base radio would send that to Honolulu, say, or Sydney, Australia. There was no on the field reception. So you're hoping that they would forward that some way to tell you that. Now, if you had contact with the ground support, if he couldn't report that to the radio on Henderson, then he had to wait till he came back, got back to report it, and so it was pretty hard.
Didn't they raise a black flag or something like that if there was an attack pending?
When they first did, they would blow the horn and raise the flag, but then that meant everybody shoved off for a foxhole. Well, then what do? Everybody's sitting there waiting. So they said enough of this, so they would change it, and they didn't sound the alarm until the Japanese were just about ready to drop, and then they'd take off. But they stopped that dead time. They were losing too much maintenance time and things like that.
So the airplanes, when you were there, would be your SBDs, the F4s, F4Fs, right?
The F4F.
And the occasional P-38.
No, we didn't get... They never got P-38s while I was there. P-38s came in afterwards. After I left, then there was a definite change. I mean, there were more planes available, more pilots available. Living conditions were decent. You're no longer at Henderson Field. You're up at what's the name of it? Up at Munda, on the next step from Guadalcanal to Munda, Bougainville to Princess, what is it? Empress Augusta Bay. That was on Bougainville, and then Green Island. And Green Island was the place we finally settled down and then left. That was our last.
Yeah, that's where Jerry Coleman flew out of.
Yeah,
he flew out of Green Island.
And the thing with that, our all through. Well, no, I'm not going to get into that. So that was about it. I mean, as I say, the conditions were just stunk. When you went to go to bed at night, they gave you one blanket, and you were at a cot unfolded. So you either put the blanket on the cot so you wouldn't get cold, or you'd put it on top of you so you wouldn't get cold. So you make your choice. And then if you had any mosquito netting, you put your mosquito netting over your face, and then you get all set, and then hey, here they come, and you jump out and hit the foxhole. So you're either cold or hot or dirty, or I mean, it was just.
Well, what you were staying in were tents amongst all the trees, right?
The what?
The coconut trees, and you had the tents amongst the coconut trees, and then the field was. The airfield was scraped in such a way to have a landing strip, sorta, but it wasn't made out of crushed
Marston batting.
Right.
Yeah.
And coral too, wasn't it? Crushed up coral for some part.
The what?
It was largely when they got there. I think it was just the crushed up coral, and then they added the matting later, I believe.
Oh yeah. Well, matter of fact, if it rained too hard, you had to. You couldn't get airborne. You couldn't. It was just too. You sink down in the mud and it was a mess. So
well, you had, I mean, really high pressure tires, so they sank in pretty easy. I
that's
guess.
right.
Yeah.
So really, they built a fighter strip close to this, and so sometimes you could move over to the fighter strip, and it would be firm enough you could get airborne, but not too often.
They called it Fighter 1, didn't they?
Yeah. Matter of fact, we were muddied out, and so we went over there one afternoon to spend the night, and we had an air raid, so we had to get out of the airplanes and go and get in the foxhole. And we stood up with water up to our knees the rest of the night while this guy was dropping drums or whatever he was doing there. So
didn't they ever try and get that?
Didn't they what?
Didn't they try and get that guy, that Washingmachine Charlie or whatever they called him?
Yep.
Didn't they put up a fighter or something like that?
But they couldn't find him. They'd send out maybe a couple of dive bombers to maybe to be parallel bomb, you know. They couldn't find him. Nobody at that time had any formal night flying. You just if you had to go, you had to go, and so you went, and that's what killed our skipper. They got a contact late in the day, and he volunteered to take two planes and attack them. So he gets two young Marines, the first caught, and he and the two Marines take off. Well, the weather was stinking. As soon as they left, Henderson went closed. It was just pouring down rain. So he evidently couldn't find the Jap ships, and they never did find out what happened to the two Marine pilots. But he found the Mercado Bay, where the Japs had the seaplane base, and so he found that, and he was tracking down the island, and was heading toward Santa Isabella, and all of a sudden, well, again, I'm only repeating now what the natives said they heard an airplane, and he came in and he went in steep, and so we assumed that was John Eldridge, that he was trying to land. You know, when it's completely dark, you don't know where the hell the water is, what kind of you can't go that way, because you do, of course, you're dead. And if you don't set it right this way, it's going to spin on you. You're dead anyway. So that's what happened. He couldn't find the surface water so that he could slide along. And
so he ran out of gas, in other words. And
well, he could have been. Yeah, he ran out of gas because. And he ran out of room to fly because it was the weather was terrible, but the sorry thing was there was only 2 days and he was going to be out, and he gets killed that way.
Was that Eldridge?
Huh?
What was the man's name?
That was John Eldridge.
John Eldridge.
Lieutenant Commander Eldridge. He had been given, we didn't know this at the time, and I didn't know until I looking it up on the internet one time. He had a Navy Cross, and it was recommended for a second Navy Cross. He would never say, he wouldn't say no. The damn fool, you know, he would, it just, sometimes discretion's the better part of valor. It's better maybe not to do it this time, but you can do it again because there's plenty of targets. There's targets every single day. So if you wanted to be a hero, you damn well could find this kind of targets.
Now, having said that, though, you won the Distinguished Flying Cross. You won the DFC. You were presented the DFC.
Oh well, the DFC was a nothing.
Really?
Well, they give it to everybody. Well, they did in the big boys, the ones in the CVs, you know, we were dirt because we were working off the dirt, but they if they did 25 things, they get a DFC, and then every 5 missions after that, they get an air medal. So some of them will have 2 DFCs and 4 air medals or something like that. I mean, that's ridiculous.
So what you're saying is you got a DFC because you survived and flew a lot of missions, not because you sank 4 ships or something like that.
I think they wanted to give you something, and so if you read my citation, that's not true. That's not true. There are mistakes in there that should not have been written.
Well, since I haven't read it, what does it say? What actually happened so that you?
Well, it's what the damn thing says. They talk about attacking airfields. Now, which one is this? I don't know which one it is. But anyway, there it is. And
are you just being modest?
huh?
Are you just being modest?
No, I'm not modest, but it
says, for heroism and extraordinary achievement in serial flight as division leader and pilot of bomber in Bombing Squadron 98 during operations against enemy Japanese forces in the Solomon Islands and the Bismarck Archipelago from October 29, 43 to May 15, 44. Completing numerous bombing and strafing attacks on Japanese ships.
Yeah, but that's not this one. That's the next tour. I had 2 tours down there. Now there's the one.
Okay.
There's the one.
Okay, and so this one, here's the first one. That's I see. Actually, I found this on some naval flight log thing about you yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And here's a picture of that guy. Who's that guy?
Oh, yes. Who was that then?
Who is that guy?
Yeah,
good looking, huh?
I've never seen that before.
Good looking guy, huh?
Yeah, he's pretty handsome. Have you seen is the picture of you with the beard in the memoirs?
Yeah.
Show him the picture of you with the beard.
Did you see the one with the beard?
No, I haven't seen that one. Well, let's say for heroism extraordinary, dive bomber pilot attached to Scouting Squadron 71 in action against enemy Japanese forces on the Solomon Islands area from September 28 to November 5, 42. Preceding numerous vital bombing raids on enemy surface vehicles, Lieutenant Junior Grade Murphy pressed home his attacks with fierce aggressiveness and expert airmanship, scoring 3 direct hits and probably 2 others on hostile destroyers.
See, that right there is, I wouldn't, I don't think that's right. Shall I say, I couldn't see him, and my gunner never reported him, but yet they did. Now, how did you get him? We didn't have intelligence officers at that time. At that thing. Later on, they had an intelligence officer with every squadron, and they would interview the pilots when they come back from the strike and make up a thing like that. But they didn't have them on the canal. And say how they knew all this is what I don't understand. Nobody ever asked me what did I see or what did I do. Yet they come up with this. Yeah, it was, and then. When you attack a ship, attack something, and you know you got a hit, and it comes out that it's not you, but it's the guy who's leading the 6 planes or whatever. It's why didn't they put in there my gunner shoots down an airplane? They give him they don't even mention his name. I mean
So okay, but you have to admit, I mean, even though they have numbers here which are suspect, it says by his dauntless fighting spirit and unswerving devotion to duty throughout these engagement, Lieutenant Junior Grade Murphy contributed in large measure to the success of our forces in repulsing determined enemy attacks on Guadalcanal. That's true.
Yeah, but
if you weren't there, I mean, it probably would have prevailed anyway. But you sure were part of it.
Well, it rings false to me. It rings false. In other words, they gotta. I think we ought to give him an DFC. He did pretty good, so let's make one for him. Okay, then so they get a barrel. Here's one's pretty good. Put that in there. That's the way it strikes me.
That's and actually everybody I know that's ever received a DFC or whatever has said pretty much the same thing. It's like,
yeah, but who could care less? Who could care? But you go if you have to go. But if you don't have to, don't stick your neck out. I mean, there's plenty of time for all that. And
well, let me ask you this. Okay, when you were in Guadalcanal, Henderson Field, did you think you would make it?
Did I
think you would survive?
I don't ever remember much about that. I remember that on you get ready to go on in, and well, for one instance of the few that I led, I start out in, and the AA is shooting, and you see some here, so you steer here, and you see some here, and you steer here. You're trying to, and I mean, you wonder, is that the way to do it? I mean, I know the guys in Europe, they had to go straight because they had bomb bays full of bombs, and they had to put them on a target. Whereas us, we were flexible enough so that we could maneuver around the bad spots. But maybe that doesn't set us up good enough to commence our dive. And so now I guess there were guys, and still are guys, that would say, well, I'm going to go around again. But then there are other guys who say, well, there it is, I'm going to take a shot at it, and away you go. I mean, if you have the decision to make, you have to make it right then. Am I going to do it, or am I not going to do it?
Now, when you knew there were ships out there to go after, did you have fighter cover with you? Did you take did the Wildcats go?
No, we didn't have fighter cover because they felt it more important to shoot down the Japanese other fighter planes than it is to worry about. We were supposed to be able to take care of ourselves because we got the .30 caliber machine gun back there.
And you say one of your backseaters actually shot down a Zero at one time?
He surely did.
Really?
He surely did. And I stood right there and watched him with only one gun firing. I could hear it firing, and I saw the plane, go in.
What was his name?
Pano, P-A-N-N-O.
Where was he from?
I don't know any of that. all I know, he was a plane pusher on the flight deck, and that's all he did was just get in the back seat. He didn't know how to fire a gun or load a gun, or he didn't.
How many times did you fly with him?
That was it.
One time?
That was it. Right? Well, no, after the ship, then he flew with me every day on the canal. Yeah, on Guadalcanal. He was my rear seat.
Okay, so on the day that you were flying off of the Wasp, when the Wasp got sunk, was that the day that he just got on to get his flight pay?
That's right.
So he gets on to get his flight pay. It also shoots down a 0.
That's right. Not on now. No. This was one of our flights attacks off of at Henderson Field. He shot. That's the one where John got on the water, and so that forced him to get in the cone, and then Pano shot him down. And I noticed that he and the pilot, they evidently went to the Essex class carrier, because they went to a squadron, and he got shot down, and he and Pano got killed.
Oh, that's too bad.
But nobody ever told anybody. So I don't, and I only got that through. I don't know how I got it.
So after that day, when you landed back in Henderson, that must have been pretty exciting for both of you guys.
What?
That he shot down a Japanese airplane.
I don't remember that anybody ever even mentioned it. Never.
You didn't get out of the airplane and doing high fives and
No.
having a drink or anything?
No.
Was there any alcohol at Henderson?
Not on the canal at that time. The second trip out, yes, there was alcohol, and good alcohol too. So, matter of fact, before we left to go overseas, we all put in like $50, and one of the guys knew a place that he could get, and so he sent the money to buy booze. And when we get to this is a separate thing now. We came back and then went back out again for seven months, and went from Guadalcanal to Henderson Field to Bougainville to Empress Augusta Bay to Green Island. We went all the way, swapping back and forth. We took 9 planes off of each of the CVLs they were building, which meant 36 planes, and they put them on the P. Willie, Prince William, took them on down and put them on the beach at Espiritu Santos. Then they said, okay, now we're going to split them in half. 9 of you will go to combat, 9 of you will stay here and be prepared, train and be prepared. And you can get an R&R in Australia or New Zealand. So after about 2 months, they'd swap. The 9 would come down, these 9 would go up there. And the ones up there would have a standby, day off, strike. So every 3rd day would be a strike. Every 3rd day would be a standby, and every 3rd day would be a rest. So that went on until
So did you stay in the SBD the whole time?
There what?
Did you stay in the same airplane, the SBD, the whole time?
Not we SBDs. The SB2C will go to the big boys in the carriers. What class carrier was that? Damn it. But anyway.
You didn't want to fly that one anyway, did you?
Huh?
No one liked that airplane. The SB2C, no one liked it.
No. I was the SB2U. SB2C was a new dive bomber. Atlantic to the Pacific. It came through the canal. When we got to San Diego, we turned in all our SB2Us and got SBDs. And then SBDs went with us the rest of the war. Because the SB2Cs was the new dive bomber, but that went to all the big carriers. So
you stayed in the SBD the whole war?
Yeah.
How many hours did you finish up with? Any idea? After the war?
I think I ended up with, at the end of the war,
Yeah.
well, maybe 4,000 hours.
Wow. Wow.
But then I got a job with General Dynamics Convair, and I built that up to about 12,000.
Well, but you stayed in the military till 61, right?
I stayed in, 51, let me see, 41, 61.
Right,
60,
right.
20 years.
Your wartime experience is so fascinating.
I think it was.
Okay, so you had one tour, and then you got over there in September, October, whatever, and then you came back from the war. When did you come back? I guess after a year or so.
No, when we came back, and this was typical of the other three, is we went to an airfield and they gave us 9 airplanes, and that was our contribution. So we then later would join with another 9 plane and make it 18, and we got a full squadron. So we got 2 18 squadrons that were taken from the CVLs, the light cruisers. So they couldn't with the SBD on the light cruiser on the hangar deck, they couldn't push 2 airplanes past each other. So they had to go up and over and down, and it was just untenable. So they
Well, the SBD didn't have folding wings, did it?
no.
Well, okay. So what ship were you on then?
Now I'm on the Cowpens.
The Cowpens.
Cowpens, which was a CVL, which was. I'll tell you something that's interesting I ended up flying the R7V, the Super Constellation. You see them, beautiful.
I know
beautiful,
what it is.
huh?
I know. Yeah.
Beautiful airplane.
Beautiful airplane.
Well, anyway, I was flying. So one day
When?
I was captain on.
When?
I was at Honolulu with the Air Force Field at Honolulu, and I was on VR7.
Okay.
VR7, and so I was qualified.
What would VR stand for?
Transport.
Okay.
Transport. So I was qualified to fly the VR7 as captain. So I had a day where I got to fly up to Midway, pick up a load, and come back. It took about 4 hours up and 4 hours back. So you get there and hang around and wait until it was time to leave. And so So we were flying along on our way back. We're 19,000, and because there was only, we had 19 women, I think, that were coming out of Midway to go into the Checker Hospital in Honolulu, and we were doing great until all of a sudden the oil pressure on number 4 engine went to 0. So what do you when you close them and they close them up? What do they call that when that?
Feather.
Huh?
Feathering the prop.
I feathered. Yeah, so we feathered the prop and we kept going towards French frigate Shoals, which is about halfway. So we were about a half hour from French frigate Shoals, and number 3 started in on us. So we feathered number 3. Now we got 1 and 3. Number 2 feathered. It was number 2. So now we got 1 and 2 feathered, and we got number 3 and 4. Number 4 is we go to max power, and we start on down, but we can't hold it thing. We don't have the strength to hold it on a steady course, so we're going in a big circle, and if we do that, we'll never get there, and we just, that's it. So on the number 2, they had a toggle switch, and it's used on landing and takeoff to back up the rudder control. So if you turn that on, that now gives you the strength to bring it back. So now we've got the switch on and we're going straight, but the switch is only cleared for 10-minute use. So now what do? So we're going on down, because now all of a sudden number 4 starts in. So we have to pull back on 4. So now we've got full bore on number 3, and number 4 is not feathered, but it's having trouble. So we settle down, go down. At 4,000 feet, we can maintain altitude. So we fly on that for about an hour and a half until we come to Midway. Thank God we're going to get. We make a pass at Midway, and the weather was stinking, and we missed the pass, so we had to go around. So I started up number 2 just to make sure that if there's anything left in it, I can use it. So we came around and landed, and it was okay. But what happened was, the day before, a flight of Air Force jets came through, and they all refueled off the underground system, which when we came through, we fueled from the underground. Well, they were supposed to have back pressured the gas out of that. It was because it was not gasoline; it was oil, you know, for jets.
JP5.
Yeah, and so they never did. So what they did was they pumped pure jet fuel into 1 and 2, and number 4. But halfway through 4, it ran out of jet fuel, so they brought in a truck and put the rest of regular gas. So now we got number 3. That's good, clean gas. Number 4, yuck. So we turn number 4 on and run it as close to as we could to the maximum power before it started to get bad, and we got back. But the 2 hours from flying back from there, that was worse than any strike I made out of Guadalcanal. I mean, because there was no place to go. If that gave out, we would have had it. But
so what year was that?
that was 1944.
No, it had to be later than that.
Later than
It
that?
had to be. It was after the war.
Oh yeah. It was.
'Cause they didn't use jet fuel.
1961, about 1958, I think it was.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
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 I think about that time. But that's a case in point where I thought we had it that night, but that's it.
So you said you had 2 tours. So what was the second tour?
When you're gonna go to combat, you flew into Guadalcanal, because now is a thriving city. I mean, they got 3 runways. They're hard surfaced. We got airplanes from every service. They're flying B-17s out of there. So piece of cake. So then you went from there up to.
So that was like a transition.
Huh?
People would come over there, go to Guadalcanal, kind of get used to the time change and the combat missions and all that sort of stuff.
That's right, yeah.
So you were probably an instructor pilot there. You were an ops officer someplace. Where were you an ops officer?
Yeah, well, we would end up at Munda.
Okay.
And Munda was the nicest airport I've ever flown out of. It was just absolutely slick, and it was made from oyster shells.
Right.
And so we would have our tents there. We would have our drinks there. We'd do our combat flying out of there. And then after a while, I guess they felt it was too nice for us. They sent us to a place called Empress Augusta Bay, which was halfway up Bougainville. And then from Bougainville, we would go to Green Island. And Green Island was our last point of being on against the Japs.
What was the unit you were in at that point?
That was VB-98. They called it 98 with 36 planes.
And VB stands for?
Bombing Squadron 98. So.
Oh, that's what that second
Huh?
Oh, that's what that second DFC was about. So
Yeah.
And
yeah.
your job there was to be were you just a line pilot, or were you an instructor, or were you flight lead? Or?
Just a pilot waiting to drop a bomb. That's all we were, and so it.
And so at that point, you were what island were you bombing?
We were, most of it was aimed at Rabaul. Rabaul consisted of 5 airstrips, and it was a very sophisticated, well kept up Japanese air base. And in the beginning, before we start bombing it, oh hell, they could launch 100 airplanes. They want to strike our group down on Henderson Field. They'd launch 100 planes, and we couldn't do it. We couldn't go as far as Bougainville, but no, they could go all the way down to the Henderson Field, drop their bombs, come all the way back.
Well, the P-38 sure could, because that's how they got Yamamoto. They flew all the way up to Rabaul and got him up there.
They put belly tanks on the F-38, P-38, and they shot him down. And I've heard people complain that was not fair. Oh, it wasn't fair. And why people would say that? But this.
Why would they say it wasn't fair?
Well, because it was. We knew where he was, and we knew what he was going to do. We knew exactly the program, the time, and it was right. We knew they were waiting there for him when he got there, and they just shot him down. Plus, there's two other planes that were supposed to be protecting him, and
well,
there
were 2 Bettys, and I think 4 Zeros, and they shot down the Bettys. They didn't really shoot down the Zeros.
Yeah.
Did you know about it at the time?
No.
That was a secret till the war was over.
The P-38s were at another field. In those days, they had enough airfields that the F-4Us would have one field, with SBDs would have another, and then they would join after they took off and go about their business. But
did you ever fly an F-4U?
Oh yeah, I loved that airplane. I was wishing I could get in a squadron, but I took an F-4U when I was at Trenton, New Jersey. I took it to 50,000 feet.
No.
And I could see that. That's the only time. Stupid. I mean, because it wasn't long after.
The Corsair.
Corsair, yeah.
With 2,800
Yeah.
cubic inches and 2,400 horsepower, yeah, you could go that high. Yeah.
We used to pick them up brand new out of the factory, brand new. Bring them on down to Trenton, and they do an acceptance on them, and put the full load on them, then take them up and take them out over the ocean and fire all the guns. And when they had 4 on each side, when you fired 8 guns, you could feel that airplane go like that.
Okay.
Amazing.
So was this during the war?
No, this was after the war. This was this was just before the war ended. Just before the war ended. It was in 1940, late 44 and early 45. It was.
So you were in the acceptance squadron back there.
Yeah, and we used to pick up F-4Us, FM2s, TBMs, and that was it.
Oh, you got to fly a lot of airplanes.
Huh?
You got to fly a lot of airplanes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh wow, fun.
Oh, it's great.
So did you fly much after the war?
Yeah, I got a job with General Dynamics Convair, and used to fly support of the missile program.
Oh really?
No, but that's when you retired.
That's after retirement. But between the time of the war until 1961, did you fly much in that area?
No, we're getting they're too seniors, he said. But the R-7V was my last airplane that I actually flew. Yeah. Oh well, I used to. When I came here, I'd get qualified in the DC-3, and I'd do the what they call a hop flight or something. Would fly up the coast and drop and try back. I'd pick up a few.
Kept the flight pay too.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Okay, so you think you were back here in San Diego when the war ended?
Yeah, I think so.
And what was your job then?
It was a job I didn't like, and so I retired. I could have stayed on, but the job they gave me, it didn't make sense, and it sounded like somebody was not playing the game right. So I thought the best way out would be to retire, because I'm going to have to retire sometime anyway.
Sure, yeah.
And so General Dynamics offered me a job as an engineering writer, and I took it. And so it was here in San Diego, and at Lindbergh Field. And so every day at lunchtime I would go down to the flight department and sit there and eat my lunch and say, "Hey, you got a job for an aviator?" Nobody said. Finally the head man said, "Oh, go over and get your license." He says, "We'll hire you." So they went over, and the FAA, based on I showed them my logbook, they gave me a private pilot, a commercial license. But then after I got in the squadron, in the business, then I got them to pay for it, and I took my airline pilot's rating, which gave me fine. And then I could go any place for the company. I'd go to Algeria and train pilots. I trained pilots all over for the company, because I was the only one that had airline pilots. I couldn't understand why they didn't have more of that, but all they had was just one, and I was the one. And of course, my family didn't care too much for that. But
were you living right here then?
In Coronado.
When did you buy this house?
1961. Yeah, I went back east and came back, and Elsie, we were living right over there, came by and saw this for sale by owner, and she came in and bought it. And
I thought of one other thing. Okay, when Jimmy Thatch lived here on this island, right?
Yeah, over on 9th Street.
And you obviously knew him.
No, I didn't.
You didn't? Oh.
Jimmy Thatch was, I don't think, too sociable, although he was not in my category. He was Naval Academy, and he was too smart for me. I mean, let's face it. Well, he was.
Well, when you flew your SBDs and you were in combat, and when you were going to be attacked by Zeros, did you go into that Thatch weave business?
We didn't. No,
you didn't.
We didn't. Well, we had the gun in the back, and that supposed to take the place of the Thatch weave.
How many times did you actually get confronted or have combat with the Zero?
I'd say about 6 times.
Really?
But
so, Dad, you never answered what you did after the war until you got out in '61 for the Navy. What'd you do? Did you fly for those 15 years?
Oh no, I flew for 10 years.
I think is the most interesting is the whole Guadalcanal thing. There cannot be very many people that were in the Cactus Air Force left.
I would. Yeah, I often think, I wonder if there are any around that maybe if they read something that you put out that might recall. I picked up one on a boy named Moeller, and he's dead now, but his son contacted me and wanted to do all these things, and I told him, no, I couldn't do it.
SBD pilots don't get medals of honor, I guess, huh?
Yeah, no, I don't. I never knew any SBD pilots that. Well, I did know 2 that were at Midway that got the Navy Cross. John McKinney, who's now dead, and Clayton Fisher, who's now dead. So. So now you're in Guadalcanal, and it's about 6 months after Midway. And you knew some of the guys that were at Midway. Did you ever talk about it with them? Did they tell you about it, or? I talked to Clayton Fisher, but not very much. And John McKinney, I didn't. John McKinney got hired on General Dynamics, so he and I flew quite fairly around when we were with General Dynamics.
What was he flying there at Midway?
What?
What was McKinney flying at Midway?
He'd be probably an SB-2C. He was not a fighter pilot.
Okay.
So it would be SBD or SB-2C.
Well, he would be one of the guys that attacked the ships and sunk the ships. Yeah.
I haven't been able. I don't know where they get that information. I've been trying to track down both of them to read why they got the medal, the Navy Cross, and I can't find it. I don't know. I thought maybe they got it at Midway, but I've read all kinds of stuff on Midway. I think I have read every book they wrote on Midway, and they don't mention their name, so I don't.
When you talk to them, did they? Because I know when Torpedo 8 was lost, it was because they got there before the fighters got there to protect him, because there was an argument in flight about the direction to go.
Yeah.
I think that the name of the guy, I can't remember the guy that led the flight of Torpedo 8. He said the heading was 240, and the leader of the dive bombers and fighters said it's 260.
Yeah.
And so the 240 got there and they had no protection. That was the bad news. The good news is that although they were all shot down, the Zeros were back on the deck.
That's right.
And
yeah.
so here come the dive bombers.
SBDs or whatever they were. I think they were SBDs.
I think so. Yeah.
Because that was right the beginning of the war. Yeah, they were SBDs.
Now your daughter said that on the Midway is an SBD that you flew.
On the what?
On the I think.
Remember was that an actual plane that you flew, or was it just an SBD? The plane on the
that
Midway.
wasn't. I didn't fly it that I know of, but it was the SBD that.
Yeah.
So, no.
That's the one consistent thing I find with these gentlemen I've been talking to who are in the late 80s and 90s. They didn't smoke.
Yeah.
But they drank.
Well, if they're Navy pilots, it's required.
Right, Dad? Dad? Everybody was drunk in the war, is what you told me. Everybody drank. That was the only way you could get on the damn airplane.
Yeah, well, they did. We had.
Everybody was drunk.
Yeah. Well, here's where we're coming into. Remember, I said that we took $50 before we.
Right, sure.
Okay, when we got out to Munda, the payoff. Along came this shipment to the VB-98. And we each got like 2 bottles of gin, 1 bottle of this, and one, and so most of us drank them. But one of the guys in the squadron, this son of a bitch, and he went around and bought people's booze, and he paid a pretty price for them. I mean, he wasn't stealing them. And then he went and opened them and broke them into smaller, shots, and come that New Year's Eve night, all over the base, you could hear the guns bang, bang, and these guys drinking this, and I tell you, so he made a bundle out of that. So
anyway, I think we've talked enough. What do you think?
I think so.
Yeah, this has been great.
But if it had been a couple of years earlier, might have been a little bit better, but I don't have the memory now that I had then.
I think you did great.
Well, I don't know about that, but
I've read about Guadalcanal. I saw that movie, The Pacific, that was on TV. They talked a lot about it. In the last 2 days, I've read a lot about it. Wow, that was a miserable situation. How in the world anybody could survive that?
I'll tell you an interesting one. It was the morning after the Japanese battleships shelled us. And so everything was quiet, dead. And along came the Japs and now the Zeros and the Bettys, and they're circling, waiting for something to happen. And we tried to shoot at them, but they get away. But all of a sudden, one of the Bettys pulls off and comes screaming down the runway, and got just about the end of the runway, and he goes, boing. And everybody went crazy. Hooray! They yelled. They jumped out of the foxhole. So that was our day of fame.
Well, but then right after that, you must. I know they had to repair the runway, and then after they repaired the runway, then you went out and probably searching for the battleships after that, right?
No, because we couldn't get a plane off. We only had 2 planes that was flyable. And we couldn't. One dumb son of his taxied into a shell hole, and then we couldn't. We couldn't get.
Was that you by the? Was that you by the way?
Oh, that was me. I forget that. Erase that.